And hello, how is everyone doing? I'll give you a few seconds. And as you hop on here, say hello, how are you? Comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from. Again, I'm always curious to see where people are tuning in from. And do me a huge favor. And as you're coming on here, definitely share this to your wall so other women can also get into the conversation really about what led these women to really give up their life and walk with God in this journey. So definitely do me a huge favor and share the video out to your wall. If you have a group, definitely that really helps. Because again, I've said this several times that this is a time where a lot of people are feeling secluded, isolated. That it didn't really help with the quarantine. So now more than ever, I feel that we really need to open up about our stories, really pressing for the month of September for us to share our testimonies, right? So if you're on here, say hello, how are you? Two things you could do. Actually, three things. The first thing is definitely go back to YouTube when you get a chance and subscribe to A Note for God. The wonderful thing about that is that as soon as this ends, you can go back and watch it on YouTube. And I like that sometimes because I can watch it on the TV or on the phone. So definitely do me a favor and go to subscribe on YouTube at A Note for God. The last 5 days or 5 interviews are already up there. So you might actually want to do like a little marathon and binge watch. Let me go. Oh, here we go. Do a little marathon, binge watch if you are, work out in the morning or you listen to certain things at night when your kids are sleeping. So definitely do that. Go to YouTube and subscribe and listen to that. The second thing is if you are ready and willing to share your testimony, definitely drop a comment below or DM me. I have a few days still available for the month of September. And if you've seen a few of the videos, it's pretty easy. We'll talk about your background, what led up or what events or things led up to really surrendering and giving your life over to Christ, and what has happened since. So it's definitely just a little chit chat conversation between girlfriends to share our testimony, right? And or if you're like, no, girl, I'm not ready to go live. I'm not ready to be all over Facebook or Periscope or YouTube. You can do me a huge favor by simply just sharing to your wall, right? Simply sharing it to your group or your wall so other women can definitely listen to those stories, because we all have stories. And other women have said it in the other interviews, and I definitely said this in the first day, is because we're women and the way we are built. Yes, we all go through stuff, but it's like, okay, we need to find a solution. We need to get there, right? I don't have time to sit here and boo-hoo-hoo. It's like, let's move it on, right? And that is great. But we also sometimes have to kind of stop and share our testimony, right? Because this is going back to what one of the girls, I think one of the girls was saying, we tend to compare ourselves to other women and, oh, their life looks wonderful, or look at them, they're buying Starbucks every single day, but we don't know their story. So this is definitely a great series to watch, to see and hear everybody's story, because again, we all have a story. So if you have any questions, definitely drop them below in the comments and we'll come back and answer them. We are just waiting for Gaby. Oh, there she is. Her ears were probably itching. And she's laughing. I'll bring her in.
Hi, guys.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
It's kind of breaking up. Or it's kind of staticky. Can you hear?
I had my AirPods on. I'm not sure. Can you hear me a little bit better, I guess?
It sounds like it sounds staticky.
I'm on my laptop, so and do something here with the sound. Let me test the audio really quick.
Yeah.
Does that sound a little bit better or no?
No, it sounds like it sounds staticky and like butchered, I can say.
Okay, maybe I can.
Perfect. Don't move anything.
Okay. I fixed it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I was just about to introduce you, and then you popped in a little corner box. All right, so this is Gaby Gonzalez. I hope I spelled your last name right, because reading that and stuff.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so you can definitely connect with her on IG. She is a realtor here in Las Vegas. So if you're looking, shameless plug, you're looking for a house or sell a house, contact her. Not your average _ realtor. Gaby. So definitely follow her on Instagram, or like I said, if you're looking for a house or something real estate questionnaire, ask her.
Yes. It's a great market for sure.
I know, definitely. Anyway, so brief introduction. I think I've known you before I had my child, my oldest.
Mm-hmm.
It was about 7 years ago. So that's how long I've known Gaby, for about 7 years. And that's through our husbands, that they work together in the same company. And then I didn't see you for a while because, work and all that stuff. But I really started to connect with Gaby about 3 years ago, for 2017. And unbeknownst to me, she was really a Christian woman of God. And I was not expecting that, because when I met her the few times, she didn't, she was, I think, too busy mean mugging people, but whatever.
Right.
And then I was like, what? So we definitely connected, and we connected more in 2007. And then now, definitely, like I said, I think in the first video that I did, there's very few women of God that I can truly, truly trust. And when they say something, I do take that into heart and consideration, because it's not like, one of them is you and Ty. You're not coming from a place of, let me speak up my opinion or my feelings, because we know where that gets you.
Right? We sure do.
Right. But they're really speaking from spending time with God in prayer, and they're giving you biblical advice, right? It's not like, girl, go cut his car up, go cut her.
As much as we would like to act upon our flesh, we got to say, what would God do? What would Jesus do, Lord?
God would not want you to do that. I want to do that. That's not God. Okay, so we got to think about it. So, definitely. So thank you so much for coming on and really sharing your story. Well, it's pretty easy, right? We'll start with a little bit about your background, which I know, because we kind of share the same upbringing, religions. So just tell us a little bit about your background, and then really what led to kind of surrendering, like I said earlier, surrendering and really, giving your life to Christ. So start off.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, Grace. I know what you do is really awesome, because it does take a lot of time and sacrifice to even just jump on and, do a live or whatever's God, put on your heart. Sometimes we have to be more courageous than we want and be like, all right, Lord, if that's what you said, I'm going to do it.
Right. I have 2 kids I always say this as a disclaimer. I have 2 kids. They can pop in here anytime they want. So let's just
right. Yeah, mom of 3 right here for sure. The kids are always, they always want to know who you're talking to and who's on that camera, and they're all in the business. But that's, they're kids. They're just curious. But thank you, Grace, again for having me on your page. I think it's awesome what you guys are doing, and I do try to share time and every now and again try to pop in and say, hey, ladies, God said this, or I've encountered this or that. But like you said, our backgrounds are very similar. I grew up in a Hispanic, Mexican, very Catholic religious household. And of course, my parents or the people in the household aren't really upholding, most of the sacraments, because we got to be honest, who can, right? Anytime that we make a mistake or that we just stumble or anything that happens, we can't just run back to the church and be like, I did this and I did that. It's not normal, it's not feasible, and it's just not the way that God intended our salvation to be. I didn't know any of that growing up. I did have both of my parents in the home, so I am very blessed to have had my mom and dad in the house. But my dad and my mom were having their own problems. I think just a lot of things that had transpired in their marriage and in their life, and they had... there wasn't any God, I guess you can say. There wasn't Jesus in the household. There was just a lot of religions and restrictions and rules. And, it's funny when we're kids, it's like your kids test you, right? When you say you can't do that, the kids want to see if you're not doing that, right? They're like, wait, okay, you're telling me that I can't do that, but are you not doing that? Can I have this chocolate? No, why are you eating it, right? And it's like, something when we're not a part of the family of Christ yet, and we're not filled with the Holy Spirit, it's almost like we just want to test everything. Yeah. And my parents, they had a very, very tumultuous relationship. It was like hot or cold. They were either really, nice to each other, going places, and then the next minute it was like, no, they were just two enemies in one household. And for kids it's kind of like, okay, well, if my parents are like that, then I guess that's just the way I have to be. But see, my dad was very he had a lot of issues, and he was very old school. My dad's a lot older. He is very old school. It's like the rod iron type of parenting, where there's just no middle ground. There's no let's work this out. No, it was very yes or no. Yeah. And my mom, he treated my mom very much the same. And my mom developed kind of like this attitude where she was, she would always tell us, don't let anybody talk to you like this. When you have your husband, you don't let him treat you like this. When you have your husband, you make sure you have your own bank account so that you can leave when you need to. It's just, she was trying to protect us in what she, in the environment that she was in. She wanted the best for us. She was, my mom has always been amazing. My dad too, he aside from, I think, their tensions with each other individually, they were good parents. My dad was very old school, and my mom was more of the softer, she was more understanding. And with all of the turmoil that was happening in the home as I got older, and I learned how to drive at a young age. I think I want to say I was like 11 years old, Grace, and I was driving a car. I had no business driving a car at 11 years.
One of your sons. Wait, he's like.
Yeah, Georgie is 15, and I'm like, I gotta teach him how to drive. We gotta teach him how to drive. But those were one of the circumstances that my mom was like, listen, I need everybody in this household to know how to drive, because in the emergency that something happens and your dad can't take us somewhere, or I'm not home, you guys need to learn how to drive. So it was always her mentality was always prepping us, keeping us prepared, which, when we think about it in a relationship standpoint, that's something really hard, to not feel like you can just trust your husband, right? You could just be like, I know they're going to be okay. They're going to be taken care of. It was always fight or flight. Like, you guys have to be prepared. You guys have to be this. You have to be independent. You have to be able to have your own bank account. And that's the mindset that I grew up with. Right. It was a defensive, protective mindset, right? Yeah. And I moved here. We live in Las Vegas, right? Yes, Sin City.
The hottest in the planet right now.
It lives up to its name, right? Yeah. And from California, I think when we moved here, we were little kids. I was in middle school. My sister was already in high school. It was like my last year of middle school. And kids are very different. California, we were all very kind of very naive, very innocent, kind of, like dumb. You're a little kid, right? You don't need to know any adult stuff. But when I moved here, the kids are completely night and day. I mean, these kids were like bad, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know. And we moved here. I started going to middle school, and I kid you not, I saw like a group of kids jumping into a car like at 7 a.m, and I'm so dumb, and I'm like, where are those kids going? You know? And the other kids were like, they're ditching school. I'm like, what is that? What do you mean? What does this mean, ditching? So I was exposed to a lot of things that I don't think even my mom really prepared for us to encounter. You can tell your kids, you know, don't do this, don't do that, you know right from wrong. But if you don't tell your kids, listen, I know this is exactly what they're going to tell you. This is exactly what's going to happen in school. You need to be mindful of this. You're influenced, right? You get influenced. You're hanging out with the wrong kids. And my dad was so strict, and my dad worked at night when we moved here. That's a bad mix. Along with the fact that they were having their own turmoil. I never wanted to be home. As I got older and I was a teenager, I did a lot of things to not be home. I played several sports. I had a job at the age of like 13. I knew how to drive, right? I knew how to drive. I had a job. I was ready. I was like ready to like leave, right? And my sister had obviously high school friends, and then we move on to high school, and I guess my freshman year, I was still getting kind of acquainted, had some friends now, and was, just a regular kid. And then my friends were like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And I had older friends. I think that age gap between freshman and senior is very critical, because us as freshmen, we were super impressionable, right? Like we want to hang out with all the cool kids. We want to be invited here, invited there. And it's extremely, the pressure I think that teenagers face, I don't think that it's really expressed properly. I mean, kids are under a lot of social pressure, peer pressure. You're trying to be cool. You're trying to fit in, especially if you're from a different state and you barely have any friends here. You're just looking to be one of the cool kids, right? One of the
to survive.
yeah. And I drove, right? So I started hanging out with, kids that maybe I shouldn't have hung out with, and doing bad things. So when we moved here, I told you again, the kids were so crazy. I mean, I want to say the kids were bad. When we moved here, we moved to a bad neighborhood. And the kids from the school literally would chase us home and try to beat us up. Yeah, they wanted to beat us up. I don't know. They would call us names, all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So then at an early age, I think because my dad was attempting to teach us how to defend ourselves, right? He didn't want us to get hurt. He taught us how to fight. He was like, you guys have to defend yourselves. And, you have to make sure that nobody beats you up, don't get bullied. But I mean, there's a slim line between don't get beat up and go beat everybody else up, right?
That's hilarious. Let me teach you how to fight people.
Yeah. So I found this fascination for like fighting people. And I know that the root cause of it was because of everything that was happening in my home. Right. I really couldn't express I didn't want to tell my friends that my parents, my dad was like this or that, or my parents were always fighting. And I certainly couldn't, fight with my parents. My parents are very strict. And, you had your little bouts of rebelliousness where you kind of talk back, but we would get slapped. Like, you don't talk back in our house. Yeah, you don't talk back. You just be quiet. Right. So it's just in high school is when it really kind of went off the rails, and I would fight everybody. I had a lot of friends, and then I started ditching and hanging out with a lot of people, and my dad worked at night. So, when my mom would go to sleep, we'd sneak out, and it just kind of snowballed. It's like once you do one thing, you're kind of like, I already did this. I might as well go do this.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm already out past 12. I might as well stay till 3 a.m. type of thing.
Right.
And I was always
mind.
Yeah, and I have an older sister. So anytime that we did anything, we went together. She went to a different school, so she had a different group of friends, and then I had my friends from my school. And she was always the one that went home. She was like, "I'm going to go home. You're going to get us in trouble," And I'm like, "No, I'm going to stay out. Bye." Scary cat. Like, I'm scary. I'm staying out.
That's hilarious. She's like, "I'm going to get in trouble."
Right. And you know that saying, nothing good happens after midnight. I mean, it's true.
No.
Kids are mischievous. Nothing good happens after midnight.
But what they say, the only two things open after midnight are legs and the ER room.
That's right. The
That's
ER.
right. I mean,
Nothing else.
open after midnight.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we were just kind of in this lifestyle where I knew of God. My mom would always say, you know, she's Hispanic. She would always tell me, "Te va a castigar Dios." You know, anything that bad you would do, you're going to be punished. God is going to punish you. And we would go to church on Sundays a lot. My mom would she would pray, like she had like a prayer book that she would pray, but they were like very, you know, for ritualistic Catholic prayers type of things. And I never understood or never knew the character of Jesus, of God as a father or as a forgiver, as a God who loved me. And also, I think one thing that's critical is God creator. So when we go to secular schools and we're influenced and we're taught, you know, the theory, Darwinism, right? Theory of evolution, dinosaurs, the Big Bang theories, all these things, they can confuse you. So when you go to church and you're hearing, you know, something that's, you know, churchy, and they're like, oh, God made you, you don't understand that because you never really were taught exactly how God made you or the story of creation, how did it transpire? So you grow up very confused, right? You grow up in a secular world. You want to be popular. You want to have friends. You want to, you don't know who you are because you're lacking an identity. There's an identity crisis because you don't know who you are in Christ. I always saw God as a big, you know, big God in the sky that's like whoosh, gonna, you know, punish me. Like, and I was scared. I was scared because I was doing a lot of bad things as a kid because I didn't want to be home. I didn't want to be home. I didn't want to be hearing the fighting. I didn't want to, you know, it just wasn't a place where I wanted to be.
Right.
And, you know, so I spent a lot of days outside of my house, and I would just come home when my dad would go to work and, you know, just kind of lived, just existed. I think, you know, as a kid, you don't really know. And because you are suffering with an identity crisis, you do a lot of dumb things, to fill your void. You're looking for love. You're looking for acceptance. You're looking for people to value you. And you're looking in all the wrong places. Yeah, that's really what it is. And it's hard for a teenager to understand, you know, who they are because they're already battling with, you know, hormones and adolescence. And you know, they're changing and, you know, things are happening in their lives so quickly. And, you know, my mom always worked. She didn't work until we moved here to Las Vegas. So we were teenagers when she started working. And being alone, I don't recommend anyone leave their kids alone for too long, you know, maybe like if you have to run errands, like an hour or two. But, you know, a lot of the times I would come home and, you know, my dad was either sleeping because he had to go to work at night. My mom was working. So a lot of the times I walked home. I got rides, just, you know, things that kids do. And then by the time I was in sophomore year, obviously I was backed up on my credits for school because I was skipping school. I was ditching. I was doing all these things, just feeling terrible. I felt terrible. I didn't want to tell my parents. I would hide everything from my parents because I knew I was going to get in trouble. And hanging out, we would go, you know, I hung out with a lot of older people because my sister was older than me. And at the age of 15, I met my boyfriend. Well, he wasn't my boyfriend. He was my friend at the time. I met my friend who, you know, was older, 3 years older, drove a car, had a job, you know, was it's just, it's like when you're younger, you always wanted the older boyfriend, right? I want the boyfriend, you know, maybe can pick me up and take me, you know, blah, blah, blah. Right.
That's exactly how it is. Right. And he has a car. So that's a bonus.
Right. You're like, woo, you're all flattered, right? Wow, my boyfriend.
Like little things back then, if we only knew.
Right. Exactly. So I was a kid that was lost. I didn't know God. I feared my dad. I didn't have the father-daughter relationship. I did have it because I do want to say he did have his moments, but it was more fear than anything. I was afraid of my dad. I knew he was going to get us in trouble. I was more trusting with my mom. I would tell my mom more things or hang out with my mom, and all those things left me feeling really unappreciated, right? I didn't know, what my outcome was going to be. I just knew that I didn't want to be home. I didn't know who I was in my identity. I started hanging out with older friends. And then at the age of 16, who now my boyfriend and we were having a baby. Wow. And I was pregnant and I was so scared. I just remember thinking I was so scared. I'm like, my dad's going to kill me. My dad's literally going to kill me. And for 6 months, I carried that burden and I hid it from my parents.
Wow.
So I did everything to hide my pregnancy from my parents. I would wear sweaters, and my son was born in July. It was hot.
Oh my girl.
I
know it's hot. Imagine July.
Yes, here in Las Vegas, as soon as it's spring, it's hot. Well, I was doing everything I could in my pregnancy. I was very ashamed, very, very ashamed. I was so scared. What I did is I actually ended up kind of withdrawing from school. And I told my mom that I had to go to a different school because I had to catch up on my credits. I knew that I had to finish school because in my mind, in my life and in my mind, I was basically living like a secret life. I was planning my escape. I was planning, I was gonna get another job. I was gonna go apply for insurance. I was gonna go, and all these things that a teenager should not have to do. Still to this day, by the grace of God, I don't know how in my mind at 16 years old, I had enough, enough maturity to try to figure it out, because I remember my mindset was, I don't want to have to ask my parents for anything. I'm so embarrassed. This can't be a burden to them.
Right.
What am I going to do? I have to run. I have to run away. And I told my boyfriend, obviously, and our relationship was also very, I guess it's kind of like when you see things and the environment's familiar, we kind of go to the same thing, right? We do the same thing. Right. It's like generational things that can follow us.
Because you don't know any better.
Right.
Right. Like earlier, that's what my mother said to do. It was okay. So when you're in a relationship, you're like, they do it at home. It's no different.
Exactly the same. We were two kids, I can imagine my boyfriend was probably like, wow, I'm gonna have to be a dad. I'm gonna have to have a responsibility. I'm only 19. I can only think that he wouldn't want that, right? He wouldn't want the responsibility, but he stuck around and we were together. His parents were a little more understanding. So I had to tell my mom, Mom, I'm expecting a baby. She, of course, flipped out because she hadn't even noticed anything. Wow. And she's a very observing mom. So you can just imagine the lengths that I went to hide everything.
Right.
And it was horrible. I just can't imagine when I think about people who are hiding because of shame. Yeah. It's extremely hard. It withers at your soul because you're carrying a burden that you just don't know what to do. Right. So I'm so thankful that in all of my lostness, there was still like a tug at my heart. God was there, even though I wasn't, I wasn't converted yet. I was still Catholic, and my childhood was not perfect. But I think all those things made me who I was. And I said, okay, I'm not going to give up. I had my baby. I lived with my boyfriend. My dad, eventually he came around. He was very loving. They helped me with my son so much. My parents were very involved. So were his parents. We were living there for a little bit until we can kind of get our lives together. And, two teenagers in a relationship that have no idea what to do because both of the examples that were before them, their parents were not the best examples. it's just like, the blind leading the blind, right?
Right, exactly. It's like let's start over again.
Yeah. And rightfully so. His parents wanted to protect him.
Right.
My mom and dad wanted to protect me. I was still a minor. So they would give us advice that kind of would pin us against each other, right? And I always had that mentality, like, I got to be independent. I can't rely on anybody. I not even on my boyfriend. I got to make sure. And then you start developing, as you're a little older, you start developing that prideful attitude, kind of like the, Latina, they say, oh, those Latinas are crazy. Like, he's not going to tell me what to do.
Right.
Yeah, and it's terrible advice.
It is terrible advice, because you grow up and you're like, that is totally not the advice I needed to be told, because you were wrong or what have you. But yeah, that's not what you need to be saying.
No, it was terrible advice. I think it just made us both even more self-righteous and prideful toward each other, because we didn't know. We were clueless, like the Bible says, we're blinded. We're spiritually blinded, and we do things that we think are wise, which are completely stupid things to do. But in our self-righteousness, we just think that we're so right. And I learned a lot of hard lessons because of that, because I did have a really bad attitude. Not to mention, I had a stigma and a label of teenage mom.
Yeah.
That carried a burden in and of itself, and yes, I was taking care of my baby, and we were both parenting our son, and we were doing okay. That label is, it could be crushing to somebody who doesn't have any support. Yeah. And we see a lot of teenage pregnancies end up in abortion, or, some adoptions and things of that nature. And I could see why, because there was no support. There was no support in the household. There's more support for people who want to essentially kill their babies, and there is support for women who want to have their babies and take care of them. So I'm very grateful, even though my parents, they still weren't, they weren't converted. They were just very religious, and then they began to pressure me, when are you going to baptize the baby? When are you going to baptize the baby? But I never did. And I don't know why, because I did follow the sacraments when I was younger, and I knew that it was important, and my boyfriend's family was Catholic. Right. So there was just always something, I don't know, I was always very rebellious, I guess you could say. I always thought like my way,
or the highway.
Yeah, don't tell me what to do.
Hey, don't tell me.
Yeah. And here I am. I'm a teenage mom. Fast forward a few years, our relationship, we hadn't got married. There was a lot of fights in our relationship because of that, because I wanted to be married. And then, his parents were saying, don't get married, you're too young. Wow. Yes, my parents were saying, get married. It was a mess. It was a hot mess. And, a lot of the times we were just left in the middle to try to like fight through it. Right. And, we hung out with the same crazy people that we were hanging out with, and, drinking, partying. At this time, we're older now. So now we're, partying, going out, drinking, and doing just all kinds of stuff that, worldly stuff. And it wasn't until 2011, I think it was, when I met my friend, who was really awesome. And she just carried something about her. There was just something like a presence to her. I know if you've met somebody who's super anointed, you just kind of want to hang out with them. You just want to be with them. Like, you just want to talk to them and ask them questions. Right. And that was, for me, that was my friend, because she carried herself very differently. And we were almost, we were around the same age. And, we worked together briefly. And at this time, I'm working in a management position. And then she moved away. And then God opened the doors for me to have a promotion, and I began to manage a property on my own. And I had the opportunity, I needed somebody to come and work at my property. And she had just told me, hey, I'm moving back. Do you know anybody who's hiring?
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, I'm hiring. Yeah. And we had worked together before. So she came to work at my property, And, this is like maybe a year or two after we had worked together.
Mhm.
And every morning she would read a devotional. And I always wondered, I'm like, what are you doing? What is that? What are you doing? And she would tell me like, oh, I'm reading a devotional. And she would share it with me. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, oh, well, it's about God or this or that. And I'm like, really? I'm like, oh, all I knew about God was, Catholicism.
Right.
I just saw him as a God who was going to punish me for everything that I did.
Right.
When I went to church, you're not able to even take communion if you haven't confessed.
Right.
And, right. And who wants to confess when you're a teenage mom,
Mhm.
unwed teenage mom who is, a hot wreck? Who's going to want to go and tell the priest like, oh, hey, I'm here to tell you what I did. That's so humiliating, and at that time we have such a prideful heart that in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to go tell some random dude what I'm doing.
Exactly. Like, who wants to do that? Which is, and I had the same experience raising Catholic. It's like, and they kind of remind you, if you haven't confessed, you can't take communion, but you can go ahead and confess on Saturdays at 5, whatever day. It's like, what?
Yeah. Right. And and now that I'm I can say I'm a blood-bought believer in Jesus. When I think about those experiences, I honestly think they were more humiliating than anything, because when you do see everybody get up from their seats who have quote unquote confessed and are clean enough to take the communion, you kind of sit there and you look around and you see all the people that are not right with God.
Right.
But it's not being right with God from a manly human perspective, a religious perspective, which I think hurts. It's very hurtful. You feel like you're the least of thee, right? And you're like, oh, I'm not worthy.
Right. Right.
There's a resentment that almost builds up towards God.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know him. And it's sad because a lot of people don't know him. And they just grow up the same way, feeling like they're unworthy, and at that point, my friend began to share these daily devotionals that she was reading, and I would ask her questions. I'm Catholic, so what we believed in, girl, we believed in ghosts, witches. The curanderos, the candles with the Jesus on them. It's just so influenced by all of these ungodly things. And I remember I would ask her silly stuff. I was so dumb, right? I was just, you're just right. You don't know.
What do you know?
So I would ask her like, hey, so tell me about like ghosts. Like, do ghosts exist? And there were just like these funny conversations that we would have, but she never presented anything to me in like a scholar way. She wasn't like a Bible thumper. Like, she wasn't like, well, you're evil, you're living in sin. She was so patient, and she would tell me like, well, the Bible says, ghosts don't exist, but this is what does exist. She would explain it to me. And if we had questions that maybe she just didn't understand or, wasn't too sure, she would call her pastor. Like, literally, she'd be like, let me call my pastor and we're going to ask him. And I was like, dang, you got your pastor on speed dial? I was like, wait, what? Like, what? How? Like, I can't even talk to the father at the church without paying $50 for the appointment,
Right, exactly. Like, you got the pastor on speed dial? What?
Yeah. And what is so I think what is so mind-blowing, Grace, is that when I was growing up, I had Christian friends, but the moment that they would challenge our religion, I remember like, dude, like the gloves were off. Like, don't come after my religion. I don't know why it's like that, but I know that it's because I was.
Are you saying that you as a Catholic was like that, or the Christians were like that?
No, the Catholics. Me as a Catholic. Yes.
I don't want to say 100% sure, but I feel that like 90% of Catholics are like that, especially, brought up Catholic. You ask them a question, it's like they get defensive and walls go up. I'm like, it's a simple question. Why does the Bible say don't worship this and this, but you're doing it? It's a simple question just to know the answer. How dare you ask us that question? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And my whole family was like that. My dad grew up in a very Catholic religious home. He went to Catholic private schools all his life.
Oh, wow.
And he would tell me, oh, I know the Bible from the back to front, blah, 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 right? I know the Bible from back to front. Maybe you knew the Bible, but you didn't know the God of the Bible, right? You knew what was being what you were reading, but you never understood the entirety of the message or received the revelation from it, because the Bible's a living book. It's a transformative book, and he was reading it from a what does it say, exegesis, where you read it to receive the full context revelation, and then you read it to only your point of view because you're coming in with a biased perspective. And a lot of people do that, and I'm pretty sure my dad was doing that too. And there was just a lot of things that he would say, and then we developed this defensive attitude about how our religion was the supreme best religion ever that had ever existed, right?
Right.
But yeah. And with my friend, that never happened. I never, it's just the way that she would talk to me. I never had that defensiveness. And I know it's because it was God working through her, because he wanted to talk to me. So even before I came to Christ, I had a lot of visions and prophetic dreams, and things that I would dream. I would receive a lot of word of knowledge. I didn't know what any of this was, but a lot of the things that were in my dreams and in my visions would happen, and then I would be super fearful. Like, I would get so scared, like, oh my gosh, why did that happen? I dreamed about that. I'm like freaking out, and I didn't understand. I was like, I don't know why this happens to me. It's just really weird. When I was 16 and I was hiding my pregnancy, I had a very, very vivid vision, an encounter with Christ. And, I woke up weeping, just sorrowful. And that's when I told my mom that I was pregnant, at 2 a.m, because I told her that I was going to die because Jesus had come in my dream and in my vision. And I was so terrified because my dream, I know to this day, it wasn't just a dream. It was a vision, and it was a visitation. And Christ had revealed some things to me that I didn't even know at the time, like, the gender of my son, what he looked like, and things like that. And I was just terrified. But when I talked to my friend, she just ministered to me very, very simply. We would have conversations. And then she finally said, hey, do you want to come to a Bible study? I'm going to be holding just a few friends, just this Bible study. And this is why I say, I think it's super important that groups like this one, and even, if you could do groups in your home, any type of Bible group, church, whatever you can do it. Because I share my testimony because I was saved in a small group. I wasn't ready to go to the church because I was afraid what my parents were going to say. You're going to turn Christian. You're betraying the family. Yeah. That's how they take it. They get defensive. They're like, how dare you, right? So I wasn't ready for that. Not only that, but I had a lot of issues with my dad at the time. Had separated from my mom. I was upset at him. I hadn't talked to him in a few months, which was it's not easy for me, because even though my dad had a lot of his flaws, my dad was always there for me, and I loved my dad. I knew he wasn't perfect, but I cared for my dad and his life. So I had a lot of things happening in my personal life. My boyfriend was verbally abusive, and we had really bad fights, and we hated each other, basically, Right. And I always had an escape plan, right? And by this time, I had already bought a house. We had cars. We had our son. And the things that were happening at home always ended up being, well, if you don't like it here, you can leave, right? That was my attitude. Well, I bought this house, and if you don't like it here, you can leave. Right. Because at this time, God was merciful enough to give me a job that I could provide for myself and my kid. But it wasn't the thing for me, because I relied on only myself. I became very, how can I say it? Maybe just not aggressive, but arrogant. I became very arrogant. And I was like, well, I can make it on my own. I don't even need you, you know?
I don't need a man. I don't need you.
Yeah. And I belittled him a lot. You know, I degraded him. I didn't respect him. And the root of that, the disrespect and everything, was because he hadn't married me. And I felt like, you know, why haven't you married me? A lot of our fights were because of that. You know, it's the same thing, you know, especially from growing up and going through all that turmoil. Then you get pregnant, then you have this stigma, and now you're already in shame, but now your boyfriend hasn't even married you, right? And everybody's asking, why haven't you? You know, anytime that you see whoever, you know, when are you going to get married? You know, all I could do was stare at him and be rude, and it would make me mad. Yeah, and anything would set us off. You know, as soon as we get in the car, I'm like, you see that everybody's asking, why don't you marry? You don't want to marry me. Why was I going to want to marry me when all I did was bark at him all day?
I don't want to marry you, Gaby.
He didn't want to marry me. I was crazy. You know, and he was crazy too.
And he did it. I mean, he probably thought about it, but you know.
Yeah, and you know, two wrongs don't make a right. But you know, he had proposed, right? I think that's kind of like a lot of young couples will do that. Well, he proposed. And the proposal is really just to simmer you down. I'm being honest, ladies. Listen, ladies, that proposal, if the wedding date ain't set, the proposal is just to simmer you down, right?
And shush you up, because you got to ring it, so you can't say nothing.
Yeah. But I knew much. I was like, no, there's no way. I want to be married. You know, we had been engaged way too long, you know, and I hated it when people would ask me, like, when are you guys going to get married? And then I would get mad at him. Well, my friend, you know, she invites me to this small group, and I go. And it wasn't comfortable at first because I didn't understand. I had to go and I had to go and find a Bible. I think she let me borrow a Bible because I didn't even have a Bible.
Right.
And you know, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's all these nice ladies, you know, and they're like all Christian. And here I am, like single, you know, here I am basically, you know, teenage mom. I'm already an adult at this point, but you know, I'm unwed. I'm shacked up with my boyfriend playing house, you know, and it kind of, you know, it's intimidating. I was like, wow, you know, I don't know if I want to come, but I loved my friend, you know, and I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this for her. You know, I'm just gonna go. Yeah, I'm just gonna go. Well, as the weeks progressed, God just did something so miraculous in my heart. And the more that I learned about this God and Jesus and the forgiveness of him and just the mercy and everything that he had done for us to even be able to be part of his family, I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking, why hasn't anybody told me this? Mm-hmm. Why didn't anybody tell me that I can go to Jesus and just ask for forgiveness? You know, why was I put through so much with all these religious restrictions and the humiliation? And I just remember being like mad and being like, I felt like I had been robbed of something so amazing. I felt like I had missed out on something that could have saved me from so many hardships. So I went literally from not knowing God except for the God at church to just diving in and loving Christ so much that same night that I converted and I gave my life to Christ, I remember, you know, we had like a closing ceremony. And my friend is praying over us. I had never experienced church this way. Mm-hmm. Church was never an intimate thing with Christ. Church was always, you know, get all dressed, you know, with your Sunday suit. You got your button all the way up to here and your hair, you know, pulled back. And this was intimate. This was an intimate encounter. And at the end of the entire, you know, I think it was like 9 or 12 weeks, my friend was praying. There was worship music playing. We were praying. And she, you know, asked me if I wanted to become a believer in Christ. I did. I said a prayer of salvation. And then she anointed me with what I had no idea there was anything even called anointing oil.
You're like, I don't know how I use for cooking.
I'm like, you know, I don't know. But I remember it was like all the shame and everything, the rejection, everything that I have felt my entire life just kind of went. I could feel like the heat almost like coming down from my head down to my feet and just kind of leaving. And I remember just being on my knees and praying, which I had never really I never had done that in my life, you know. And my friend, I did the prayer of salvation. My friend anointed me with oil, and the second that she touched me, I don't know how to explain it, but I like my ears, I could feel they got super hot and flushed, and I started like sweating, and I was sobbing so intensely. And I didn't even know what had happened to me. At that moment, it was a supernatural encounter, and it was kind of like all of the visions and the dreams and the feelings that I had towards Christ. The emotion like manifested in the flesh, and I felt that rush of heat coming through my body. Wow. And I was just sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't stop crying. And I just remember thinking, this is God. I remember saying and saying it audibly. I said, this is God. This is God. This is Jesus. And I had never experienced that in my life. So you can imagine, I went from being super religious, you know, Catholic, fighting people, to I just wanted everybody to know about God.
Right.
So I did a 180, and then I did what nobody should do. I became a Bible thumper. Right?
Well, nobody should do, but
I don't recommend it, you know. And I wanted everybody to be saved. So I'm passionate about things. So when I'm passionate about things, I come off a little aggressive, and sometimes that's not good. You know, not everybody receives it the right. You know, you have good, holy, godly intentions, but there has to be a teaching, right? There has to be. It's kind of like a bucking bronco. You know, the horse is going to do an amazing thing. The horse is majestic. The horse is beautiful, but the horse it's wild, right? You got to tame it. So I went from, not knowing Christ to wanting everybody to know Christ. And more than anything, I wanted my boyfriend to know Christ. I wanted my boyfriend to marry me and make me right with God. And he was like, girl, no. He was like,
no.
I don't know what you did when you went to that Bible study, but you need to stop it. And he was mad. Like, he was upset. He was like, leave me alone. You're crazy. Like, I don't know what they told you at that place. And his mentality, and I think a lot of people's mindset is, I don't want to be a Christian. I'm not going to be able to do anything ever again, but, you know, sit down and just read my Bible and sing hymns, and that's it.
Right. I can see the logic, because some people do think that, but that's not reality. But I get it.
And he didn't get it. As much as I wanted him to understand what I was going through, he didn't get it. And I didn't understand, because I didn't know everything that I needed to know yet. And I think even now, with my relationship and the way that my relationship is with God, I still have a lot to learn, because there's always new revelations. But I now understand the identity of Christ and the way that God operates. And I didn't know that then. So I wanted to force my boyfriend at the time to be converted. And, just like a wild Bronco girl, he booked. He was like, you need to stop.
I'm out of here.
He was like, you just need to stop. You're so crazy. Right. But see, I had been so radically saved, and I was like, well, I don't want you then. I don't want you. If you don't want me and you don't want God, then I don't want you. Right? And, I told my parents, I'm like, I'm Christian. I love Jesus. And my parents were upset because they wanted me to baptize my kid.
Right.
And at this time, me and my boyfriend now had two kids out of wedlock. I'm telling you, I'm like, it's like when we're in sin, we just dig our hole deeper.
Yeah, you just keep on going, because you're like, okay, we're already there.
The deed is done. Just keep it going, right?
Right. We already did the do, so we might as well just keep on going for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I told my parents. So then at this point, I was like, okay, maybe I can't just totally, be like, bye,
Right.
have a good life. We have 2 kids. That's not really what I wanted. So naturally, what happens is when you're unequally yoked, when there's a believer and a non-believer, there's only one of 2 things that can happen, right? You either your husband or wife or boyfriend, whatever, converts with you, or you backslide right back into what you were doing.
Yeah, this is true.
And because I had so many pressures coming from this way, that way, my parents, his parents, him, it's kind of like, okay, well, nobody cares about my transformation, whatever, I'm just going to keep living how I'm living, right? I'm just going to keep it going. And then the more that I did that, the more that I became very unhappy. Nothing that anybody could do or say was making me feel any better, because I knew the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know the truth and you're doing things that are against God's will, there's something that happens in your heart, but you don't understand it. And that is conviction of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Conviction of the Holy Spirit. And when you don't make yourself right, you now are in condemnation and you feel terrible.
Right.
I felt really bad about myself. I felt bad because I was sinning against God, but I couldn't convince my boyfriend.
Right.
He wouldn't go to church.
Right.
And we didn't have anybody around us to help us through this process. We didn't have, good godly counsel or friends to say, hey, listen, I know you guys are newly saved, but, let us help you, right?
Yeah.
Let us be an example. And then a lot of things happen in this time frame. So we're talking about, my brother-in-law dies in July, and then my brother dies in November, 4 months back to back. And a lot of things happen. And it's like, why God, why did this happen to us? My mom's trying to help my sister get back on her feet. And it was a really hard time. But I remember thinking, I have to help my parents, because for some reason they've always made me like the patriarch of like, help us.
You're the same one.
Yeah. So, and even in my state where I wasn't completely right with God, I knew that I had to help my sister, because I knew that I knew something, and her husband was Christian, newly Christian, freshly converted. So, I was like, I have to help my sister. So I remember thinking, only God can help us. I at least know that. And that was the time period when I started picking up my Bible and listening to worship music. And I would stay up all night long with my sister, just talking about God and all these things that I had learned. Like I had learned about the millennial reign of Christ, and so many things that I didn't know. So we would talk about all these things that were just really fascinating, and they were encouraging. And during this transition, I began to understand that I wasn't going to be able to convert my boyfriend with, what can I say, ultimatums,
Right.
and threats, and God had to teach me that, like, Gabby, that is not the way. You're never going to reach anybody that way. Right. You've got to be an example.
Yeah.
How would Jesus minister to him, Gabby? How would God treat him? You've belittled this man so much that y'all don't hate each other now, and there was and it was
you? No.
Right. And it was from both angles, right? Because he wasn't innocent. I wasn't innocent. There was a lot of things that happened in our relationship during this time frame. We had another baby. There was infidelities and things that wrecked both of us. And because most of the time I was on the receiving end of the things that were happening, I would try to, I would clap back, like in the meanest way ever, right? And I can't blame him or anybody, because I can only imagine I wasn't helping him build him up.
Right.
And when you take that authority away from your husband, or there's something that happens, I think, for the men, where they become like kids, like rebellious kids because they don't have their leadership position. It's not until you give them their full platform leadership, like, listen, you got to lead us, that they really don't ever pick up that baton because somebody else is carrying it. And trust me, if you do that for men, they will never, ever want to do it. I think women are different. Women, I think from my experience, I was like, I got to woman up. I got to take care of these kids. I got to put a roof over their heads. And I left him with no position in my household, and he did things to me and I would be mean to him. So all these things happened. And then boom, we had the deaths in the family, and I wanted to get serious. I was like, I gotta get serious. All these things that happened in our lives. There was infidelities. And after that, it's like when I was like, okay, well, you gotta go. You got to go. I don't want to live like this anymore. And I made the decision that I wanted Jesus more than anything. I wanted Jesus more than I wanted my boyfriend, more than I wanted my house, more than anything. I wanted to be right with God. So we ended up splitting for like a few days. I was like, you got to go. We had, at this time we had the infidelity, and I was crushed. I was so hurt. And I was like, you got to go. And I just remember thinking, I'm just going to be right with God. I don't care anymore. I don't care for any of these things. God really had to humble me and break me down to understand that I needed him. He didn't need me. I needed him. I needed God in every circumstance of my life. I needed him to guide me, because the decisions that I was making in my self-righteousness and in my flesh they seemed right to me, but they were completely wrong for the will of God in my life. And, it wasn't until we had kind of like that separation and things happened that I was like, okay, I'm not going to be crazy anymore. I don't care. I'm not going to be a crazy person anymore. I just want to live in peace. So, my boyfriend started coming around like, oh, okay, well, she's not that crazy anymore. She must be dating somebody.
That's hilarious. She's not that crazy, but
Yeah, he's like, who are you talking to? Who are you hanging out with? Why are you so happy?
Who's coming down your craziness?
I said, Jesus. His name is Jesus. My new man's name is Jesus, right?
Right. Where he at?
Yeah. And it wasn't until I was like, all right, I can't be like this. I can't always be like, I got to be ready to go because of the preparation that my poor mother had put me through, thinking that, she wanted me to be ready, for anything, because you just didn't know. And, my friend ministered to me. I became saved. I was so sad. It was just love. It was just many things were happening in my life, good and bad, because with the good came the bad. It's kind of like when you become a Christian and you really, really give your life over to Christ, you get like the target symbol on your back. You become a target for many things. And it's hard when, your family kind of wants to turn their back on you because now you're Christian, you're not Catholic anymore. Right. And they don't understand really the revelation of the Bible because they're not believers. And that wisdom, that the mysteries of the Bible are reserved for those who earnestly seek God. And they didn't understand. My boyfriend didn't understand, but I persevered. And I knew I had to be strong for my family because they didn't have any hope. They were religious. My brother-in-law had died. And there's nothing worse than an unbeliever, a religious person, to have a death in their family, and the sorrow is different. That grief for non-believers, even religious people, I say religious people because there's people who are religious who don't know Christ, was it's a sorrow, and I think now as a believer, I know that this is just a vapor. Our life is a transition, and we will depart one day. We will depart, and there is no purgatory. Your mama and your grandma can't pray you out of the spiritual prison, right? And and when you're a non-believer and those tragedies happen to you, they are extremely hopeless. Who wants to think like, I don't know where you are, loved one, but wherever you are, I hope you're good. What?
Well, I mean, there's only 2 places to go, so I mean, I don't
Right.
know.
And
What
that's
is not
yeah, that's sorrow. That
good? Yeah.
grief is what my mom was experiencing, and I didn't want her to experience that. I wanted to let her know, and I began to minister to her. Listen, before my brother passed away, I talked to him, and 2 hours later he passed. But before he passed away, I talked to him and I read the Psalms to him, and I told him to give his life to Christ. And I told my mom, I told my mom, I'm like, you can't think that way. So I became like a minister in my household.
Yeah, right.
So, and I began to understand what God was doing in my life. And this is why I was always very independent. God always made me a specific way because he wanted to prepare me to be that, that beacon for the people in my life,
Right.
so that I could have that spiritual backbone, because without all of my experiences that I went through, I wouldn't have the spiritual backbone to be able to withstand all of this, right?
Yeah.
So I was very grateful, because without those experiences, even from, my childhood to being a teenage mom,
Yeah.
to the bad relationship and the infidelities that that I suffered, and then the deaths in our family, I would have never been able to withstand any of that if it wasn't for the character that God was building in me, even through all of that sorrow and the pain and all the things that had occurred. So I understood at that point that I have to be the minister to my family.
Right.
And I have to be the example. So when my boyfriend finally saw that in me, that I wasn't crazy and that I did want to fix things and that I did love him, I loved him, but I didn't know how to love him because I didn't know how to be a wife.
Right.
And I don't mean like, cooking and cleaning. And I knew how to cook and I knew how to clean and I knew how to work. But I didn't know what it was to be a godly wife.
Yes. Yes.
To be a helpmeet to my husband,
Mhm.
to be his rib, to be, his confidant, to be his everything, right? And above all, to be submissive, submissive in love. I'm not saying, don't let him, push you around or beat you. No, absolutely not. But give him his place, right? And I think in society today, it's completely opposite. We got Cardi B out here with WAP talking about, I don't cook and I don't clean. These are examples that girls are looking up to.
Yeah, scary, but these are the examples that young women, and I think she even said it in one of her, I don't know where she was doing, one of the shows she was doing, her specific target, I think she even said, is 10 to 15. And she knows exactly what she's doing. So, I mean, she might be a little out there, but she knows exactly what she's doing.
Right.
If she knows what she's doing, it kind of makes you think like these parents, oh, it's just the song, it's just her. I'm like, she got you bamboozled because she knows she knows what she's doing.
That's right. Exactly. And I mean, Cardi B, she's a millionaire. I don't know how much she got. Maybe she's not cooking and cleaning, but her husband's also cheating on her. So that might not be the best advice, right?
Right.
It wasn't.
Who are you taking from? Cardi B, who is the next stripper, which she says.
Right.
She make her money, and that whole relationship is not, like you said, a godly relationship that you even want to take advice, which kind of leads to make sure as a parent, be careful what your kids are listening and watching.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And, I had to learn. It's like when my boyfriend at the time came around, I was like, all right, I don't want to live my life like this. I don't want to leave you. I want to be with you. And I was like, listen, the only way that we can be together is if we're married, and second of all, if you're a believer. Because I knew and I understood at least this, that God said, do not be unequally yoked, because my marriage was going to be a war. And I didn't want to be warring with my husband. I wanted to be loving my husband.
Right.
And I wanted to be on the same team. Light and darkness cannot dwell in the same place. And I understood that. I was like, I don't want to be an enemy in my house with my boyfriend. And I said, first off, before we even do anything, we got to get married. So my friend connected me with our pastor, and we were still young. We were still young then. And I was like, listen, maybe this is unpopular, but we need counseling. You know, I think when we think about counseling or like couples counseling, you think about like an old couple having problems. But I highly recommend that if you're young and you want to get married, get some godly relationship counseling, you know, some premarital counseling, because you're going to need those tools. You really are going to need those godly tools to get you through a lot of things. So finally, we went to our counseling. Our pastor walked us through that. We had many weeks of counseling before we got married. And a lot of the root problems that were happening in our lives, in our hearts, the scars that we carried, they were all laid out on the table. And I can say that if it wasn't for our godly counseling that we received, a lot of people carry those dark lurking roots into their relationships, and they turn the right person into the wrong person because they have all this hurt going on in their lives and in their hearts, and they will essentially vomit that on the person that they are trying to be with because they don't know how to deal. They don't know how to cope. There's a void in their hearts because they don't have God. So, you know, they'll manifest that in many ways. And many of those times it's abuse, it's infidelity, it's, you know, things that they're carrying around, whether it's soul ties and things of that nature. You know, pornography is very dangerous to any relationship, and even to married people. You know, I know there's people out there that, you know, oh, I'm going to watch, me and my husband watch this. Well, let me just tell you that you're watching is degrading and defiling your marriage, your holy and sacred marriage, right? And no, people don't understand it. They don't take it serious. And then, you know, a few months later, your husband or your wife is out there seeking other, you know, crazy people out on the dark web or God knows what, because of some fantasy that they saw, you know, and now it's all in their heads. And I think one thing that I have learned through all this is, and I tell my friends this all the time, you know, guard your heart, guard your ears, guard your mind, guard your eyes, because those are all gates. They're gates to your spirit, to your soul, to your mind. And we have to be mindful of what we are exposing ourselves to, especially if you're a new convert, a new believer. You know, if you're, even people who are in the faith that grow up in the church, right? They can fall and stumble. We know the Bible tells us that Satan tempted Jesus. So we're not exempt from that. And we have to guard our heart, guard our mind, guard our spirits, guard our eyes. We have to be sober-minded, like the Bible says, because the lion, you know, the devil's roaring like a young lion looking who to devour. That includes you.
Yes, you're not
yeah, exactly. You're not exempt. No. So I learned a lot of things in my life. I had a radical transformation and conversion. And then I heard the words that I never thought I would hear at the table during our counseling. And that was that my boyfriend wanted God. And it was, I was like, what? Like, you want to become a Christian? And I just remember crying. And it was a relief. It was a relief because I cried, because I knew, I was like, thank you, God. Only God could have done this. And I just want to share some advice with any young ladies that are watching this. If your husband, boyfriend, you know, friend, whatever you want to call them nowadays, if they're not saved, if they're not doing the right things, if they're living an ungodly life, let me just tell you, you cannot change him. Only God can. If you want to make that your mission and your ministry, and you're going to save this man, like, girl, I'm going to change him. I'm going to change him. He's going to watch. He's going to change for me. I'm going to make him change.
Right. No,
you're not.
No,
you're not. It's not. Yes. Is only through God. Yeah. Only God can change somebody. But I do encourage you to minister to them and to talk to them about God, especially the men. I think in this generation, I see more and more that men are leaving their post and they're leaving families exposed. They're not guarding their gates. Men need to take back their authority. Yeah. And that doesn't mean in a totalitarian tyranny authority. No.
Like
right, as a protector, as
Right.
a lover of the family, as a provider, as a father, as a leader, because the families need that. And I know that, going into ministry and developing the gifts that God has given me, a lot of that is family ministry. The family is sacred.
Yeah.
It is, teenage moms. I have a soft heart for teenage moms because I was once a teenage mom. But I wanted to share my testimony and let you guys know that it's been, almost 17, how old is my kid? 15, 16, 17, almost 17 years now. And we're, by the grace of God, we made it. We made it through all of that. We had to literally relearn and learn how to be husband and wife to each other. And now the way that I parent is much different. The way that I love and treat my husband is much different. And I understand now when the Bible says, that the flesh, becomes one. I understand that because kingdom marriages are literally like at a celestial level where there's just no explaining it. There's something supernatural that happens when you invite God into your marriage, and now you and your husband are on the same vibration, I guess, with God, because we do know that God spoke things into existence. So there was a vibration that occurred with his voice. You and your husband are linked, right? And I'm so thankful and just very gracious that God did all that work, because I sure as heck tried. Girl, I tried.
Him. No. But I like that you say that, and I've said that this too, that we as women, we think we can change people, specifically men or our significant other, right? And we think, but reality, we can't change anybody, right? Like you can't. Let's just face it. You might be able to change yourself, but that's about it. Even your kids, they have their own little personalities. Your husband, no, that's a no. So I like that you said that, and I've also got to the point where I say what I've said. If you're single, right? If you're single and you're a Christian, and you are, I guess, entertaining or dating other people or other men that are not Christian, that's already asking for trouble, right? So I would even venture to say, like, I mean, it's good to minister, like you said, to other people, but if you're trying to get married and be serious, don't even get tempted, because you're not gonna change him. He ain't gonna change. Right. Get yourself somebody equally yoked, like you said that to me before, a Christian man that you guys see eye to eye and are able to know that God's always first. I mean, we all have discussions, that's part of a marriage, but I see that it is less because you have come to an agreement to the foundations, right? You agree on the foundation, so there's really no discussion. Maybe like, oh, I want this instead of that, whatever. But definitely that. I also wanted to say, because you said this with your friend, and I forget who said this too. One of the girls said it before too, and I want to emphasize this too. For women out there, Christians out there who keep on inviting, because I see that's as a common thread. We invite people, and a lot of times they say no. It's okay, right? It's okay to keep on saying no, because eventually they will go to a Bible study. Eventually they're going to go to a group. Eventually God's going to be like he told me after my friend had told me, go to this church. I'm like, no, girl, I'm cool. Girl, go to, I'm cool. Okay. Eventually, God, he woke me up from sleep that day. He's like, you're going to go. So never get discouraged. I just want to say that out there to somebody. Never get discouraged when somebody keeps on telling you no, or like, oh, well, maybe some other day. You just keep on inviting, because God eventually gets that seed. And once you get them there, like for you and for me and for other people, he then takes it from there. So definitely don't get discouraged for sharing this. All right, so let's end the interview with 3 simple questions. Because you have been through a lot. Number 1, the first question is advice you would give women that are going through the same thing you went through.
Well, I would say if you find yourself being a teenage pregnant person, woman, girl, I guess I'll address the teenage aspect. I would say, don't give up and don't feel ashamed. I want to say that because with every pregnancy, God really has a plan for that child.
Yeah.
If you are pregnant and you are a teenager, that doesn't mean that God loves you any less, because I guarantee, and I know this because the Bible says this, that you would not be pregnant if that baby didn't have a destiny.
Right.
So that is one of the things that I want to address, because I know that I think in this day and age, it's very popular to just, for teenagers to get pregnant and have an abortion, or get pregnant and take I don't know, whatever pill there is to, end the pregnancy. I think we need to understand that life is precious, and that if God didn't have it in your plans to have a baby, you wouldn't be pregnant. You wouldn't have been pregnant. There are no accidents with God, especially when it comes to children. They all have a destiny. They all have, something that they are going to bring to this earth, to this world, that is ordained by God. And second, I would say any young women who are maybe living with their boyfriends, I'll tell you this.
Tell us, please.
I played house, for 10 years. I shacked up for 10 years. And I know that the root in your heart is bitter, because I can say this because I have the experience. I did not ever feel worthy as a woman, as a wife, as a human being when I shacked up with somebody. If anything, I felt resentful because I didn't feel valued. So don't put yourself in a position where you're shacked up and you're playing house and you're playing wife, but you don't have the label and you don't have your relationship spiritually presented and anointed by Christ. It's a counterfeit.
Yeah.
And you will feel every bit of despair from it, because that's exactly what I experienced. It brought nothing but sorrow to my heart. And I felt degraded as a woman. So don't shack up. Please don't do it.
Don't do it. Stay home. Stay home. Stay home. Stay home.
Yes.
Stay home until you both, or both can get yourself a house, an apartment together. Don't do it. We're speaking from experience, right? Exactly. And just kind of going back to, and I want to bring this point up too, because you said it when you were pregnant, you were teenage pregnancy, and you said, there's more, I guess, literature or stuff to have an abortion as opposed to programs, nonprofits. This is what you have to, teenage mom, this is what you do. Like I live in obviously we live in Vegas. I've been an educator for 15 years, and now as part of a counselor for the last 8 years, whatever. There is, like you said, there is not a lot of organizations out there that are targeted to help teenage moms. Like, right. They'll give you diapers and milk, but you're not teaching them. There's a difference. Here's providing, great, but you're not teaching them. And that's why I say this. I'm not a teenage mom, but I can say it because I've been an educator. As a 15 and 18 and 19, even 20, the patience, you're not fully matured. You're still developing. When that baby cries, you're like, oh, you know what I'm saying? So there's difference. So there is no program. I think maybe I can count 1 or 2 programs from what I'm aware of that will show you, or kind of have a circle or whatever. But which is kind of sad, like you said. There's more propaganda, I guess, if you will, about here's how to have an abortion and how easy it is at the end, and not enough literature out there or groups or nonprofits to help.
Right.
Mother, because it's a rise number. I don't know about other states, but in the state of Nevada, I think we're like numero uno or something like that, which is kind of sad, right? That we see this happening, but nobody's doing anything about it. So
yes,
to step it up and do something.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the and I'll say this, the theology that the devil, Antichrist, teachings in the theology is that baby is just going to come and suffer. So it's better that they don't even come and suffer at all. That is the lie. But I'll tell you this, when we take the position of thinking that baby is just going to come and suffer, and let's just not even bring it into this world to suffer because I don't have enough money to buy formula, or because I don't have a house, or because this or that, I don't have a boyfriend. We have now dictated and become our own gods. We have elevated ourselves to God, and now we get to pick and choose who is worthy of living a life or not. And that's a very, very dangerous position. I think we have to understand, it's like when we believe those lies, what's next? Are they going to kill all of the disabled people?
Well, we saw that in World War II. I mean,
exactly. Are they going to come after all the elderly? So, it's a lie that we have to be able to dismantle with the truth of God, and saying, even if, Lord, even if that baby is going to come and maybe suffer or have, maybe a few mishaps, maybe it's not going to be picture perfect, but the picture perfect family is what society says. There's nothing more perfect than letting God handle it, because God is going to make the way for that child or that baby and the mom. And I'll say, when young women are pregnant and they don't know, young teenage moms, they don't know what to do. The best thing you can do is maybe go seek out a church, a Christian. They will help you. And it is there is a lacking of ministry to teenage moms. And that is one of the things when I hear, so-and-so is pregnant, the first thing I say is be patient and do not shame that mom, because it's through that shame that we begin to take decisions into our own hands, and we start thinking, well, this baby's life isn't worth living.
Right.
And when we take that position, we've elevated ourselves up to the level of God, and we now are dictating who's going to live or die and who's worthy of living. We should never take that position. But if you know anybody who is a teenage mom, you can refer them to me and I'll talk to them. Hey, listen, let me tell you, I was in that same position and I thought I had the same thoughts, but God made a way. God made a way, and he made a really good way. Even though the things seemed really wrong and really hard at that time, he never left me. And I'm a testament to that till this day, because I have my 3 babies. My husband is now my husband. And and he has been so merciful and so gracious and abundant to us. He has just gifted us and blessed us with many things that we don't deserve. But because it's the perseverance that we went to God and we upheld him in everything.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that verse, when, like you were saying, first you were saying they're teenagers and might worry about everything, but it reminds me of the Bible verse, like if the flowers and the birds, they don't worry about anything because God will provide. Like, who are you then?
Yes.
These are just birds and flowers. Imagine what he will do for you and provide. So that definitely, that's what came to mind. Okay, so, second question: what are some important things to do as a Christian woman right now?
And I think number one, as a Christian woman, is to talk to other women. I think there is a silence in the anointed children of God, including the women, because they are afraid to speak up. I want to say that as a woman, you need to be talking to other women, especially unsaved women, and be an example. Be an example, talk to them, just like my friend did to me. When my friend shared her testimony with me, I was shocked. And I thought, how could you even be standing here normal right now?
Right.
Be courageous. Yes, be courageous. Talk to other women. And second, talk to your kids. I think moms are so important to the household. I talk to my kids, and I tell them, hey, listen, I'm still young, but I was young. I was a teenager, and find things that maybe you can be relatable to them on and say, listen, I was here. But I want you to understand that, I'm here to help you through that with God's guidance, right? Talk to women and oversee your children, because I know for a fact that there is a direct attack on the family unit itself.
Yeah.
There is a huge demonic, entity. It's a principality that is after our kids and mainly after marriages. I want to let women know that you should fight for your relationships. God never said that things were going to be perfect. As a matter of fact, when you say your vows, you say for better or for worse. For better or for worse. Sometimes it's worse. But if your husband wants to, if your husband is there, and you can minister to him, the only way that we can minister to them is by example. And I think praying for patience. Patience is a gift. And fight for your families, protect your kids. That's one of the things that I have. And be a leader, be a spiritual leader, minister, anything that you can. Talk to other women about your testimony. You don't have to be a Bible scholar. You don't have to know everything, but you do need to tell them your testimony, because God says that we're lost and then we can become converts, but he doesn't want us to just become converts. He wants us to be disciples. He wants us to be disciples, and we disciple people through our example and through teaching them what God has done for us, and telling them our testimony. So in Revelation, it says that we are saved by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. That is what saves us. So, as a woman of God, you have a responsibility, and that is to share Jesus with anybody and everybody who you encounter, and particularly these young women who are being influenced by these, Cardi B's and, these other horrible people that are out there. And I do pray that these celebrities, that they're converted and that they're saved, because that would be powerful. Let your kids know about the dangers of doing things outside of the will of God, because I had to learn a lot of hard lessons because I wanted to do things my way. And it's not our way, it's God's way.
Right, exactly. Like you will learn your lesson if you're disobedient. That's
right.
That's one of the things I had to learn. God tells you, but at the end of the day, it's free will, and if you can choose to do what you want at the end of the day, but you also have to be aware of the consequences and what comes along with that.
Yes.
I would say, like, oh, God is wonderful, but you also see in the Bible, if you read the Bible, that there's consequences. So when people, God is always great, never does any. You must have not read the Bible, because there's plenty of stories in the Bible that because you guys did this happened. Anyway.
Right. Exactly. Amen.
And the last question, maybe one or two. What are some of your favorite Bible verses?
Well, I want to say my favorite book is the book of Proverbs. And I want to say I have a lot of favorite Bible verses, but my favorite Bible verse is in Proverbs, and it's the beginning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. That is my Bible verse. I think that's the verse that really got me to wake up, because I thought, well, fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. I know everything, right? A lot of the times we think we know it all. God, but I know it all. He's like, no, you're talking about me. Exactly. I know that's not for me. I'm going to skip that verse. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And fearing the Lord comes with a reverence and a love for Christ. It really just means, listen, if you haven't read, if you're new, I would say start in the Gospels, go back and read the Old Testament. Because you will see a whole different side of God that you never thought existed. And that is the beginning of knowledge, is to fear the Lord in his love and his wrath, because God is a God of love and a God of wrath. And if we are just so pompous, right? We got a pompous spirit. We're arrogant. We got it all figured out. We're so smart. In this day and age, we see that the gods of science are fighting with the truth of the Bible, right? They elevate themselves to this God status where they think they got it all figured out. It isn't until you start taking God serious and you break down the lies and the misconception of God being a hippie in the sky singing kumbaya with the ukulele and holding everybody's hand. It's not right. It's not until you learn the true and full identity of Christ that says the God in the Old Testament, and we're not bound by law, but we do know that God, the Bible says that the word of God is forever. God is the same yesterday, today, and in the future. So that God in that Old Testament is still the same God today. And that lets me know that God is a God of wrath. And he is a God of mercy and love. And he's a God provider. And he's a loving father. But if we don't have that respect and that reverence for Christ, for our Father, and we don't have that fear, we'll never begin to have the knowledge of God. So God reserves his mysteries for those who earnestly seek him. And if we're not diving into our Bibles and we're not learning every characteristic of God, we will never understand his identity, and we're never going to fear him. This is why people abuse the grace of God, right? They're in this hyper grace theology that says, well, God is, it doesn't matter what I do, whatever, I cheated on my wife, I'm smoking crack, I'm going to the club, whatever. It doesn't matter. God is gonna, whatever. God is, God's my homeboy. He's gonna give me a pass. He's gonna give me a pass. Are you sure? I'm not saying that, he's not, that he's gonna, condemn you to hell, but you might want to check your salvation, because if you have no fear and knowledge of God, then you are going to act up and you're going to act a fool. So my favorite verse is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. That's when I began to learn about every side of God. And it wasn't a fear of like, oh, I'm scared that I'm going to make a mistake. No. It's a fear of, wow, my God is so mighty. He is just so mighty. He is the best thing that I could have ever encountered in my life. Once you have that fear for God and the wrath and the love and everything that God is, you begin to have a different knowledge of God, spirituality, your identity in Christ. And every decision that you make is one based on that, the fear of God. And you begin to live your life right because you have a respect and a reverence for your Father. That is my favorite Bible verse.
Yeah, I like that one. I do like that one because, like you said, when people say fear the Lord, they're like, oh, you're supposed to be scared or be intimidated or whatever. It's not that, right? It's knowing the consequences, right? Which I love. All right, so thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing your testimony. It's always great to cover so many things with teenage pregnancy. And then really being one in your family to minister to all of them, and then the marriage. And we can go into like another little marriage series because that is another common thing with, right? It's like, whoa, we can we'll just do that for another day because there's a lot.
We'll have to do that, Grace.
Right, exactly. That's all right. Our advice coming from Gabby and I: don't do it. Don't do it.
Yes.
Don't get married, but seek godly wisdom and equally yoked men, because you guys have time. All right. So thank you so much. If you guys are still tuning in, definitely watch the replays. Like I said, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, they're all there. As soon as they end, they're back there. Definitely share this in your wall and in your groups. That helps release other stories. These stories spread out to other people because, like I said, and I've said this, I think, in every video, one of the things that the enemy always tries to do is really isolate you and make you feel like you're the only one. And of course, it helped with quarantine because everybody's like, oh my God, we're so lonely. So definitely share this video out, and definitely do not be afraid, like Gabby said, to share your testimony because somebody does have to hear it. And we'll catch you tomorrow. Tomorrow I will be, I have to look at my thing. Tomorrow is Tuesday and I will be on at 3:30. So definitely 3:30 Pacific time. So definitely tune in for that. Thank you so much, Gabby.
Awesome. Thanks, Grace. Bye.